Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Brad Musil, and this is a reading of the Utility of Religion, Mill, Nietzsche, and James. This will be part one of chapter one, William James and the Varieties of Religious Experience. Again, this is part one, Introduction. William James is a central figure in many contemporary discussions of the philosophy of religion, and for good reason. One of his many notable works, The Varieties of Religious Experience, hereafter Varieties, provides us with one of the most thorough investigations of religious phenomena ever conducted. Transcriptions of 20 lectures James presented in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1901 and 1902 comprise Varieties. He was tasked with presenting the material for these lectures thanks to an honorary appointment at the University of Edinburgh. James, who is just as much a psychologist as he is a philosopher, offers a penetrating analysis of the psychological nature of religious beliefs in particular, expounding what he takes to be the many effects, both good and bad, of such beliefs for the individuals who subscribe to them. Indeed, James is a psychologist by training, a fact which he alludes to at the very beginning of Varieties, where he suggests that this discipline yields the one vantage point from which he feels he can make fruitful contributions to the topic at hand, asserting, among other things, that, quote, psychology is the only branch of learning in which I am particularly versed, end quote. Footnote 475 cites the source. As we shall see, of the three thinkers discussed in this dissertation, James offers by far the most sympathetic perspective of religion's utility. Interestingly, he himself was not especially religious. As Wayne Proudfoot points out, James's quote background provided him with an interest in religion without affiliation with any particular religious community. His was very much a Protestant culture, but he came to the study of religion with neither commitment to nor cultivation in any doctrinal tradition. End quote. Footnote 476 cites the source. While not particularly religious, James is able to appreciate what he takes to be the genuine spiritual and existential value religion holds for others. Perhaps it is for these reasons that James is able to present a generally well-reasoned, even-handed perspective of the utility of religion. The utility of religion is certainly of interest to James, as his emphasis on the practical effects of religion is palpable throughout Varieties, where he offers a robust and fair account of the significant effects, both good and bad, religion has in everyday life. Of course, such an emphasis on the practical effects of religion should not come as a surprise to those familiar with James, as it would seem to be an obvious byproduct of the pragmatism he is known for championing. James has become almost universally associated with pragmatism, and he explicitly adopts it as his own methodology for approaching religion in Varieties. In his lecture on philosophy, footnote 477, I am referring to lecture 18 in Varieties, which is titled Philosophy. End of footnote 477. James outlines the inadequacies of the philosophy of religion, which emphasizes rational demonstration of religious belief, suggesting it ought to be transformed into what he calls, quote, science of religion, end quote. Rather than rational demonstrations of religious beliefs, this science of religion concerns itself with the practical consequences of religious beliefs. In establishing his own pragmatic approach to religion, James also appeals to the philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce, regarded by most as the father of pragmatism. Footnote 478 cites the source. In addition to his general espousal of pragmatism, key distinctions introduced by James highlight his emphasis on the utility of religion. For example, his distinction between existential judgments and propositions of value illustrates his emphasis on the utility of religion. He couches this distinction in the form of two questions. Quote, what are the religious propensities, end quote, and quote, what is their philosophic significance, end quote. Footnote 479 cites the source. He stresses that keeping these questions clear and distinct is vital to his own project, and that he is chiefly concerned with the latter. The first question has to do with facts about religion's origins and history, and the latter pertains to its usefulness or value to us. James asks, quote, how can such an existential account of facts of mental history decide in one way or another upon their spiritual significance? End quote. Footnote 480 cites the source. He points out that many positive results can emerge from a belief with a questionable or suspect origin, and he concludes, quote, you see that the existential facts by themselves are insufficient for determining the value, end quote. Footnote 481 cites the source. To be sure, the difference between the source of origin of a religious belief and its value for the individual subscribing to it is a common theme throughout Varieties. James also suggests that it shouldn't matter whether a religious individual's belief is ultimately inspired by a natural an organic cause or a supernatural one. All that ought to matter are the effects of such belief. Quote, when we think certain states of mind superior to others, he asks us to consider, is it ever because of what we know concerning their organic antecedents? end quote. Footnote 482 cites the source. James answers with an emphatic no, and claims instead that we believe they are superior for one of two reasons. Either, quote, we take an immediate delight in them, or else it is because we believe them to bring us good consequential fruits for life. End quote. Footnote 483 cites the source. James's emphasis on the utility of religion, as opposed to its underlying cause, is encapsulated by the empirical criterion he defends. Quote, by their fruits ye shall know them, not by their roots. End quote. Footnote 484 cites the source. Clearly, given the nature of his analysis and his own points of emphasis, James's reflections are germane to my assessment of the utility of religion. Much of Varieties, especially the first half of the book, consists of James describing the phenomenon of religion and detailing its multifarious types. For the most part, extended discussions about religion's utility don't appear until the second half of the book, and even then extensive description and case studies are interspersed. Indeed, in Varieties, James spends significant time explicating what he means to indicate by religion, as well as describing the varieties of religious experience arising out of such a conception. What's more, I think that due consideration of James's description of what he takes to be religious phenomena is vitally important when analyzing what he says regarding religion's utility. As we shall see later, this is no small matter. I will suggest that different conceptions of religion constitute a confounding variable for any survey of what thinkers such as Mill, Nietzsche, and James suggest regarding religion's utility, and that they specifically underlie some of the apparent differences between James's and Nietzsche's perspectives regarding religion's utility. In view of this, I begin the chapter with a discussion of James's descriptive account of religion, part 2, before then proceeding to an analysis of what he says regarding religion's utility, part 3, and I conclude by offering some general reflections on varieties, part 4. I now turn to part 2, where I outline what James means by religion, demarcate what specific aspects of religion he proposes to analyze in varieties, and detail his primary and well-known categorizations of religious experience. Again, that was part 1 of chapter 3, William James and Varieties of Religious Experience, from The Utility of Religion, Mill, Nietzsche, and James. Thanks.